Nora won't even notice until the statements come. That is what my brother said, not in a whisper, not behind a closed door. He said it at a waterfront restaurant in Savannah on a Saturday night, leaning back in his chair with a glass of wine in his hand, smiling at his wife like he had just pulled off something clever. He did not know that my real estate attorney was sitting 3 tables away. Margaret Ellis heard every word. She set her fork down, and she did not pick it up again for the rest of the meal. I was not at that restaurant. I was at home with my son, cleaning the kitchen after a long catering job, loading containers into the van for the next morning. I did not know what Keith had done. Not yet, but I would. Let me tell you how we got here. I started Magnolia Table Catering 9 years ago. Wyatt was a newborn. It was just me and him, no one else, and I rented kitchen time from a church on Waters Avenue for $200 a month. I prepped food in 4-hour blocks between feedings. I hand-wrote invoices. I delivered everything myself in a used minivan with a cooler strapped to the back seat. The first year, I cleared just enough to cover rent and supplies. The second year, I picked up a contract with a local event venue. By year 3, I had a waiting list. By year 5, Magnolia Table was doing $340,000 a year in gross revenue. I had staff. I had a commercial kitchen. I had repeat corporate clients across Chatham County. Nobody in my family asked how I did it. Nobody asked what it cost me. What they asked was this. 2 weeks after I signed my first real vendor contract, my mother Diane called. She said things were tight. She said Dad's property taxes were behind and Keith's car insurance had lapsed, and could I help? Just for now. Just until things settled. I said yes. I set up a monthly transfer. $1,600. Every single month. $1,600 that covered Richard and Diane Caldwell's property taxes on the family house and Keith Caldwell's car insurance. The arrangement was supposed to be temporary. It was never temporary. 9 years, 108 months, $172,800. I want you to sit with that number for a moment. $172,800. That is what I sent to my parents over 9 years while building a business from a church kitchen, raising a son alone, and never once asking anyone in that family for $1 back. Not once did my father, Richard, call to say thank you. Not once did my mother, Diane, ask if the amount was manageable. Not once did Keith, whose car insurance I was covering every single month, acknowledge that I was paying for it. What they did instead was treat the money like weather. It arrived. They expected it. They did not discuss it. And Keith. Keith was 3 years younger than me. Keith had been given the kind of latitude I was never offered. When Keith wanted to try real estate, my parents co-signed his first certification course. When Keith's credit card debt hit 5 figures in his mid-20s, my parents absorbed it without discussion. When Keith married Tara Brooks, the reception was at a country club my parents could not afford, and I later learned that $4,200 of the deposit had come from the same account my monthly transfers were filling. Nobody told me that. I found it later in the statements, but that comes in part 2. What matters now is this. I was the floor holding that family up, and none of them ever looked down. 6 weeks before the night at the waterfront restaurant, my mother turned 60, Diane's birthday. The whole family came to the house. Richard set up folding tables in the backyard. Tara brought flowers. Keith brought wine. Cousins drove in from across the county. Wyatt baked a lemon cake. He was 9 years old. He had been helping me in the kitchen since he could hold a spatula. He knew measurements. He knew timing. He had watched me frost 200 cupcakes for a corporate order the week before, and he asked me if he could make something for Grandma's birthday. Not help me make it himself. I said yes. He chose lemon cake. He zested the lemons himself. He cracked the eggs one at a time, fishing out shell fragments with his fingertip the way I taught him. He measured the flour level with the back of a butter knife. He set the timer and sat on the kitchen stool watching the oven door the entire time it baked. When it came out, he frosted it with a simple glaze. It was not perfect. The layers were slightly uneven. The glaze pooled a little thick on one side, but it was made by a 9-year-old boy who wanted his grandmother to know he loved her. He carried it to the party himself. He held it with both hands the entire walk from the car to the backyard table. He set it down next to the store-bought sheet cake Tara had ordered, and he stood there, waiting for someone to notice. Diane glanced at it. She did not say anything. Tara picked it up. She held it at arm's length like it was something left out in the rain, and she turned to the table full of family and said, loud enough for every single person to hear, "It's a sad little mess." Then she scraped it into the trash, not moved it, not set it aside. She took a serving spatula, held the plate over the garbage bin, and scraped Wyatt's lemon cake off the plate in 3 deliberate strokes, while the frosting smeared against the side of the bin. The backyard went quiet. Not the kind of quiet that means someone is about to intervene. The kind of quiet that means everyone has decided this is not their problem. Diane said nothing. She was standing 4 feet away. She watched it happen and reached for a slice of the sheet cake. Richard was at the far end of the table. He looked down at his plate. He did not look up. Keith was leaning against the porch railing with his wine glass. He cracked a smile. Not a big one, just enough. Nobody said a word to Wyatt. Nobody said a word to Tara. My cousin Cooper Hayes was standing near the cooler. He was 27, Diane's side of the family. He did not say anything either, but he lifted his phone and took one photograph. The frame caught Tara's hand on the spatula, the plate tilted over the trash, and Wyatt standing 3 feet behind her with his arms at his sides. Cooper did not show me the photograph that day. He did not mention it. He put his phone back in his pocket and went to get a drink. I did not know the photograph existed until months later. What I did know was my son's face. Wyatt did not cry. His expression did not crumble. It froze. His eyes went wide and then flat. The way a child's face looks when they are learning something they should not have to learn yet. His hands hung at his sides. His fingers did not move. I walked over to him. I put my hand on his shoulder. I said, "Let's get some air." We walked to the front yard, then to the car. I buckled him in. He stared straight ahead. I drove home. The whole ride, neither of us spoke. The windows were down. The air smelled like magnolia and river water. The road was empty. We were almost to the house when he said it. His voice was small. It cracked right down the middle. Did they not like it because I made it or because I'm me? I pulled into the driveway. I turned off the engine. I sat there with both hands on the wheel. If you've ever been treated like your kindness was something they were owed, hit that like button and subscribe. I did not have an answer that would protect him from what he had just learned. There was no version of the truth that made it gentle. A woman had thrown away something his hands made in front of people who were supposed to love him, and not one of them had said, "Stop." I reached over and put my hand on the back of his head. I put both hands on his face and tilted it toward mine. "You made it with your own hands," I told him, "and anyone who couldn't see that has a problem that has nothing to do with you." He nodded. He wiped his eyes with the back of his wrist. We went inside. I made him a grilled cheese. He ate half and fell asleep on the couch. I covered him with a blanket and stood in the kitchen alone. I told myself it was just Tara being Tara. I told myself Keith would have said something if he had been paying attention. I told myself Diane was distracted. I told myself Richard just did not notice. I swallowed it. The way I had been swallowing it for years. The way I swallowed the silence every time the $1,600 left my account and nobody acknowledged it. The way I swallowed the fact that Keith drove a car I insured to a house my payments kept standing, and the closest he ever came to thanking me was not mentioning it. I pushed it down. I went back to work the next morning. I had a Saturday wedding reception to prep for, 85 guests, a 3-course plated dinner. I measured, I timed, I frosted, I loaded the van. That was 6 weeks before the waterfront restaurant. 6 weeks before Margaret Ellis set down her fork and heard my brother say the words that would change everything. Nora won't even notice until the statements come. Margaret's text arrived at 11:47 p.m. that Saturday night. I was at the kitchen table. Wyatt had been asleep for 2 hours. The house was dark except for the light above the stove, the one I always left on because Wyatt said it made the kitchen feel like someone was still awake. My phone buzzed once. I picked it up. Margaret Ellis. She was not the kind of person who texted late. In 3 years of working together on the commercial lease, she had never once contacted me outside of business hours. The message was short. It said, "Nora, I need you to pull your mortgage file tonight. Check your equity line. Call me in the morning. This is not about the lease." I read it twice. I set the phone down on the table. I sat there for a long time, listening to the house. The refrigerator hummed. The ceiling fan in the living room ticked on its lowest setting. Wyatt's breathing was steady down the hall. I got up and walked to the hallway closet. The filing cabinet was on the bottom shelf, organized by year. I pulled the mortgage folder. I carried it back to the kitchen table and opened it under the stove light. Then I opened this banking app. I scrolled slowly. The transaction list loaded. I went back through the most recent statements, one screen at a time. And there it was, an $87,000 draw on my home equity line of credit. Dated, time-stamped, authorized against my personal residence. A signature I did not make. I stared at the number. $87,000. Drawn against the home I had purchased 8 months earlier with money I earned from a business I built out of a church kitchen while my family pretended I was invisible. I did not call Keith. I did not call my parents. I made coffee. I sat at the table with the mug in both hands. The coffee went cold. The light above the stove buzzed faintly. Something inside me shifted. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a clean, quiet break, like a wire that had been holding too much weight for too long. And the last thread finally let go, not in the middle of a fight, not in the middle of someone's cruelty, in the silence, in the dark, with cold coffee and a mortgage file and a number on a screen that told me exactly what my brother thought I was worth. He thought I was someone who would not check. He thought I was someone who absorbed, who swallowed, who covered, who kept the $1,600 moving and never asked where it went or what it meant. He thought I would see the $87,000 eventually, and that I would do what I had always done. Push it down, go to work, load the van. He was wrong. I did not sleep that night. I sat at the table until the sky turned gray. When Wyatt woke up and came into the kitchen rubbing his eyes, I made him eggs and toast and asked him about the book he was reading. He told me about the chapter where the dog finds its way home. I listened. I poured his orange juice. I did not mention any of it. Sunday passed. Monday passed. I went to work. I filled orders, I managed the schedule, I returned client calls, I reviewed invoices. Tuesday and Wednesday, I finalized a corporate event menu and negotiated a linen rental. I was steady. I was clear. I did not contact Keith. I did not contact my parents. I did not send a message, leave a voicemail, or make a single gesture that could be misread as a warning. On Thursday, at exactly 7:14 a.m., I called Margaret Ellis. She answered on the second ring. "File it," I said. 2 words. She did not ask me if I was sure. She did not ask me if I wanted to talk to Keith first. She had been waiting for the call. "I'll have it filed by noon," she said. The forgery complaint was filed with Chatham County before lunch. Civil action for restitution. Keith Caldwell had forged my signature on a financial instrument drawn against my personal residence and used the funds as a down payment on a home he and Tara could not otherwise qualify for. Margaret's familiarity with my actual signed documents from the commercial lease review made the signature comparison immediate. The discrepancy was not subtle. Keith had not even tried to make it convincing. That same afternoon, I opened the banking app one more time. I navigated to the scheduled transfers. There it was, the recurring payment, due the following Monday, 108 months running. I tapped the transfer. I tapped cancel. One tap. $1,600 stopped. I set the phone face down on the counter. I did not send a notification. I did not write a letter. I did not explain. The soft click of the confirmation was the only sound in the kitchen. The following Monday, for the first time in 9 years, no money arrived in Richard and Diane Caldwell's account. No property tax payment, no car insurance coverage for Keith. The $1,600 that had been holding that family's foundation in place simply did not appear. I went to work. I had a Tuesday luncheon to prep for. 70 guests, 2 entree options. I measured. I timed. I loaded the van. Within 72 hours of the forgery complaint filing, my phone rang. Not Keith, not Tara. The caller was a CPS investigator from the Department of Family and Children's Services. Richard and Diane Caldwell had filed a report. They claimed my commercial catering kitchen was unsafe for a child. They claimed Wyatt was being exposed to hazardous conditions. They claimed my home was unsuitable. I felt nothing. Not anger, not pity, nothing. I invited the investigator to walk through the facility. She arrived the next morning. I opened every cabinet, every storage unit, every refrigerator. I showed her the commercial permits mounted on the wall. I showed her the health inspection certificates, all current, all passing. I showed her Wyatt's bedroom, clean, organized, the bookshelf full, the window overlooking the backyard. I showed her the kitchen where he did his homework every night at the counter while I tested recipes. The investigator closed the case in 48 hours. She noted in her report that the facility was licensed, inspected, permitted, and spotless. She referred the false report to prosecutorial review. Richard and Diane had tried to use my son as a weapon. They filed a report designed to threaten my custody because I had stopped writing checks. They looked at the daughter who had paid their property taxes for 9 years, and when she stopped, their first instinct was not to call her. It was to call the state. The case moved forward. Margaret Ellis handled it with the precision I had watched her bring to every contract and closing. She presented the forgery complaint. She presented the signature comparison. She presented the $87,000 draw, documented and time-stamped. And then she presented something Keith had never anticipated. She presented the 9-year transfer record. Every transaction, every month, $1,600, 108 times, totaling $172,800. The complete history of what Nora Caldwell had given the family that had just tried to take her house. The judge read the total aloud in the courtroom. Keith sat at the defendant's table. I watched his face. He looked at the number, the way a person looks at a door they have walked through 1,000 times, only to realize for the first time that someone else had been holding it open. His mouth opened slightly. He closed it. He said nothing. Tara sat behind him. Her posture was straight when the hearing began. By the time Margaret finished presenting the transfer record, Tara's hands were flat on her knees and she was staring at the table in front of her. The judge ordered full restitution, $87,000 in principal, $11,400 in legal fees, $98,400 total. The case was referred to the district attorney for felony review. Keith's name entered the public record attached to a forgery complaint. The home he and Tara had purchased with the forged funds was entered into the legal record as acquired with proceeds of forgery. Tara's name was on that mortgage. Cooper Hayes came forward during the proceedings. He provided the photograph. Tara's hand on the spatula, the plate tilted over the trash. Wyatt standing 3 feet behind her. He submitted a written account of what he had witnessed at Diane's birthday party. The photograph was entered into the emotional record. A 9-year-old boy's lemon cake scraped into the garbage by the same woman whose home was purchased with his mother's forged signature. The hearing ended. I walked out of the courthouse with Margaret. The Savannah air was thick and warm. I did not look back at Keith or Tara. I did not look for my parents. I walked to my car, started the engine, and drove to pick up Wyatt from school. That evening, Keith showed up at my house. I heard the car pull into the driveway. I heard the door shut. I heard the footsteps on the porch, uneven, hesitant. Then the doorbell. I opened the door. Keith stood there, shirt untucked, eyes red-rimmed. He had not shaved. His hands were at his sides, opening and closing against nothing. Nora. His voice was hoarse. You have to drop the complaint. The house, the mortgage, everything. It's going to fall apart. All of it. You don't understand what this does to us. I kept my hand on the doorframe. I did not step aside. I did not invite him in. Wyatt was in his room doing homework. I could hear the faint scratch of his pencil through the hallway. You forged my signature, I said. My voice was even. You took money from my home. You celebrated it at dinner. I was going to pay it back. You were not. He exhaled. His eyes moved to the floor, then back up. Nora, please. Mom and Dad, they're going to lose the house. The payment stopped. They can't cover it without my money, I said. He stopped. $1,600 a month, I said. For 9 years, you drove a car I insured to a house I was holding up, and you took an $87,000 loan against my home because you thought I would not check. His jaw tightened. His eyes were wet, but not from remorse, from the mathematics of what he was losing. I asked one question. Where is your apology to Wyatt? Keith's mouth opened. Nothing came out. His eyes searched my face for the version of me that absorbed, that swallowed, that pushed it down, and went back to loading the van. She was not there. He did not answer. The door closed softly. No slam, just the quiet click of the lock sliding into place. I went through my phone that night after Wyatt fell asleep. I sat on the couch with the screen glowing in the dark living room, the streetlight cutting through the blinds, and I did what I should have done years ago. I blocked Keith's number. I blocked Tara's. I blocked my mother's. I blocked my father's. I opened the family group chat, the one Diane had created 4 years earlier that was mostly used to coordinate holidays and share photographs of Keith and Tara's vacations. I removed myself. I opened the shared photo album my mother had set up for family events. I removed myself. I went to my emergency contact list at Wyatt's school and replaced Richard and Diane Caldwell with Margaret Ellis. I did not do it in anger. I did it in clarity. The phone buzzed 3 more times while I was finishing. Notifications from numbers I had already blocked, arriving in the half-second gap before the system caught up. Then silence. Real silence. Not the kind that carries weight, the kind that lifts it. I turned off the ringer. I set the phone face down on the coffee table. I pulled the blanket off the back of the couch and listened to the ceiling fan tick. For the first time in 9 years, nobody was expecting $1,600 from me on Monday. Nobody was expecting me to absorb. Nobody was expecting me to swallow it and go back to work. The quiet was not heavy anymore. It was sharp. It was clear. I slept through the night. I had not done that in longer than I could remember. The next morning, I woke up before Wyatt. I made coffee. I drank it while it was still hot. That sounds like a small thing, but it was not. For 9 years, every cup of coffee I had made at that hour had gone cold because something always interrupted it. A text from Diane, a transfer reminder, a voicemail from Keith asking me to call him back about something he needed. That morning, the coffee stayed hot because nobody called. Nobody texted. Nobody needed me to hold anything up. I drank the whole cup standing at the kitchen window, watching the light come through the trees in the backyard. Then I went to work. The weeks that followed were steady. Magnolia Table had a full calendar through the fall. I prepped, I delivered, I invoiced. Wyatt went to school. He came home and sat at the counter doing homework while I tested recipes. We ate dinner together every night. We did not talk about the Caldwells. There was nothing to talk about. They were not part of our life anymore. The information came to me through Margaret Ellis, the way professional information does. She did not call me to gossip. She did not bring it up unless it was relevant to an open matter. But because she handled real estate in Savannah, the records crossed her desk whether she looked for them or not. 3 months after my last transfer, Richard and Diane's property taxes went delinquent. The amount was not large by most standards. It was exactly the amount I had been covering every month for 9 years. Without it, the balance carried. Then it compounded. Then a notice was filed. Margaret mentioned it during a call about my commercial lease renewal. She said it briefly. She said, "You should know the Caldwell property on Whitaker entered default last week." I said, "Thank you." We moved on to the lease terms. I did not call Richard. I did not call Diane. I did not feel triumph. I did not feel satisfaction. I felt the specific, clean absence of a weight I had been carrying so long I had forgotten it was there. 6 months after the court order, the Caldwell family home was listed for forced sale. The property had been in the family for over 30 years. Richard and Diane had raised Keith and me in that house. It had a screened porch where my father used to sit on Sunday mornings. It had a kitchen where I had learned to cook before I could see over the counter. It sold for less than they owed. Margaret told me the sale price when it recorded. I did not ask for it. She included it in a routine update on the restitution enforcement timeline. The number was lower than what remained on the mortgage. Richard and Diane walked away from the closing with nothing. They moved to a 2-bedroom apartment on the south end of Savannah, the kind with shared laundry in the basement and assigned parking. Richard, who was 63, began driving for a rideshare company. Diane picked up part-time work at a grocery store, stocking shelves 3 mornings a week. I did not learn those details from Margaret. I heard them through Cooper Hayes, who still spoke to some of the extended family on Diane's side. He mentioned it once, in passing, during a phone call about something unrelated. He said, "Your dad's driving nights now. Your mom's working at the Harris Teeter on Abercorn." I said nothing. He did not bring it up again. Keith and Tara's situation was worse. The $98,400 restitution order was enforceable and immediate. The home they had purchased with the forged funds was encumbered in the legal record. The mortgage, which had Tara's name on it, was attached to a property whose entire down payment was now subject to court-ordered repayment. Their equity position collapsed. They could not refinance. They could not sell without satisfying the judgment first. The felony referral to the district attorney moved through the system the way those things do in Chatham County. Slowly, but it moved. Keith's name appeared in background checks attached to a forgery complaint and a civil judgment. Job applications went nowhere. The real estate certification he had gotten with my parents' help became useless. Nobody in Savannah's property market would touch a name attached to a forgery case. Keith took a job stocking a warehouse on the west side of town. Night shifts. Tara's car, the one she had driven to Diane's birthday party the day she threw away my son's cake, was sold. They went down to one vehicle, a 10-year-old sedan with a dent in the rear quarter panel that Keith drove to the warehouse at 11 o'clock at night and drove home at 7 in the morning. Their friends stopped calling. Not dramatically, not with announcements. The invitations just slowed, then stopped. The couples they had gone to dinner with, the neighbors who had come to their housewarming, the social circle Tara had curated so carefully. People talk in Savannah, not loudly, but they talk. And when the details of the forgery became public record, the whispers did what whispers do. They emptied the room. I learned some of this through Margaret, some of it through Cooper. I did not seek any of it. I did not drive past their house. I did not check court records. I did not look them up online. The information arrived the way weather arrives. You do not ask for it. You note it and move on. The CPS false report filed by Richard and Diane was formally referred for prosecutorial review. The investigators' notes documented that the facility was licensed, inspected, permitted, and spotless, and that the report appeared to have been filed in retaliation for a civil legal action. Whether charges would follow was not my concern. I had the investigators' written finding. That was enough. I did not feel revenge. I did not feel justice. I felt relief. The kind of relief that comes when you realize the thing you were afraid of losing was never something you had. I had never had their respect. I had never had their gratitude. I had their expectation, and I had mistaken it for connection for 9 years. 6 months after the court order, the Savannah Community Fair held its annual junior cooking competition at Forsyth Park. Wyatt had been talking about it for weeks. He had decided on his entry before I even mentioned the sign-up form. Lemon cake, the same recipe, the same measurements, the same method. He zested the lemons himself. He cracked the eggs one at a time. He leveled the flour with the back of a butter knife. He watched the oven door the way he always did, sitting on the kitchen stool with his chin in his hands, counting the minutes. When it came out, he frosted it with the same simple glaze. The layers were more even this time. His hands were steadier, but it was the same cake. The same boy, the same love baked into every layer. He carried it to the fair himself, both hands, the same way he had carried it to his grandmother's party. The judges tasted every entry. They took notes. They deliberated. When they announced the winner, Wyatt's name was called, and he walked up to the table and stood there holding the blue ribbon, looking at it like he was reading it to make sure it was real. I was standing behind him. He turned around. His face was not frozen. It was not flat. It was open and steady and proud, the way a 9-year-old's face looks when he has learned that what he makes with his hands has value, regardless of who refuses to see it. He looked at me and said, "I made it the same way. I didn't change anything." I nodded. I kept my voice even. "That's exactly right," I said. We drove home with the ribbon sitting on the dashboard and the leftover cake in the back seat. The windows were down. The air smelled like magnolia and river water, the same as it always did on Savannah evenings. The road was quiet. Wyatt looked out the window for a long time. Then he said softly, without turning his head, "I'm glad we don't have to go to their parties anymore." I kept my eyes on the road. My hands were steady on the wheel. The streetlights passed over us in long, slow intervals. "Me too, baby. Me too." The cut was clean. The next morning, he woke up smiling. He put the ribbon on the refrigerator with a magnet and ate breakfast at the counter while I prepped for a weekend event. He told me about a friend at school who wanted to learn to bake. He asked if the friend could come over. I said, yes. The house was quiet. The house was ours, and the lemon cake sat on the counter in the afternoon light, half-eaten and perfect, exactly the way he made it. If you enjoyed this story about protecting your children and knowing your worth, hit that like button and let me know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell for more stories just like this one. Thanks for watching.